2 weeks ago, we got back from our 2-week trip to Marrakesh, where we went to 9 different cities and pretty much saw the whole country, except for the very south, in that time frame. So after coming back, we have some, tips and tricks that we wrote down and some things that we think are important to know before you going to Morocco. So let's get into it. The first thing we want to say is that we loved Merzouga and camping in the Sahara. We think that that was probably the best experience of the entire trip and highly recommend that you do that. But a couple things. First, we think the luxury camps are way more worth it, are just really worth the extra money. I think they're only like $10 or $11 more a night, but you get hot running water, your own toilet, your own bathroom entirely to yourselves, nice clean tents. We saw another couple get dropped off at the non-luxury version of our camp and it looked desolate. So highly recommend you go the luxury route there. As far as activities, we really loved ATVing in the desert. It was so special, so different. I don't think there's a lot of other times in your life where you're gonna get to ride a four-wheeler in the dunes. So highly recommend that excursion. We also did a private Jeep tour, which was really cool as well, where you just get to see the local cultures and tribes. So we'd recommend that as well. And we also say stay at least 2 nights in the desert. We met so many people that were only doing 1 night, and you really only get, a couple hours during the night and a couple hours during the morning if you do that. We think it's a lot better if you just stay 2 nights. It's great. The camp that we stayed at was amazing. The food was fantastic, and the entire experience was just incredible. So, but a huge tip is if you go on any booking site like booking.com and look at these campsites, they're gonna have a sticker price, but there's a lot of other costs associated. So first, the biggest thing that you need to figure out is what they're charging you to transport you to the camp. So these can range from 30 euros to 90 euros for transport costs, or it can be free. Make sure you message each campsite that you're interested in and ask them what the transportation costs. Ours ended up being free. It was the only place I found that it was free. And we got to go there in Jeeps and back on camels, and it was awesome. But, we also had met 2 other tourist friends that the day before they were supposed to go, the campsite told them that their transport was going to be 90 euros, which is insane because, most of these campsites cost 40, 50 euros a night. So it's just a huge cost. And then, the ATVs and Jeeps I also inquired about. We ended up paying $40 an hour for the ATVs each and 40 euros each for the Jeep tour, and that was pretty competitive. But some places again were going to charge you 60 euros per hour for the ATVs. So it's good to just check and then also do the math and see what's the most affordable. Driving in Morocco is relatively easy, we'd say. Some of the taxis drive a little bit insane, but other than that, it's pretty easy. You need to be aware that the police are gonna stop you at some point. They have a million different checkpoints and they're extremely strict. So we think that you can generally go 7 kilometers per hour over the speed limit. We're not really sure though. We got a speeding ticket and it was about 15 euros, so it wasn't a big deal, but make sure you have cash to pay those speeding tickets. Morocco also notoriously has corrupt police officers that might stop you and give you an illegitimate ticket. So for example, we had friends that got stopped and the officer was not giving them a legitimate ticket. They didn't get any paperwork, and at first he asked for 40 euros and then he brought it down to 20. So that one was like clearly a scam, but just make sure you have a little bit of cash, but not too much cash on hand for those kind of interactions. There's also 3 different kinds of stop signs, so just make sure you look up the images before you go. The other thing too is you cannot record the police. You can't even have your phone out really when they're pulling you over because they're gonna think you're recording them. It's this weird, really weird strict rule that they have, so just make sure you know that. Also know that cars too don't really stop for you, so be careful crossing the street. It's a little bit dangerous. And then just generally speaking, don't skip the smaller cities. Don't skip Ay Benadou, don't skip thing here where there's Todra Gorge. We found those places to be the most beautiful. Generally speaking, we didn't love the big Medinas, particularly with Marrakesh. We started in Marrakesh and we just found it extremely overwhelming. The streets are extremely narrow, it's a maze, and there's these motorbikes that are zipping through and they do not care about the pedestrians. Like, you have to move out of the way for them. It's very hard to get around, and we just found that people were extremely pushy there. Like, you couldn't look to buy anything without being berated by a salesperson. You couldn't look at a restaurant menu without somebody berating you to come eat there. So it's just kind of exhausting in that sense. It's also just kind of like a very dirty and very smelly city. So we just We didn't love it. You were getting yourselves in situations where people are always trying to take advantage of you. You really have to be on your toes. For example, one night my husband and I we were walking back in the Medina, and these kids came up to us, or teenagers, and they were like, "Hey, you're going the wrong way. Those doors are closed. You have to come this way." And we were kind of like, "Huh?" We don't really know if there's a door that's actually closed, but we followed them, and they led us down this other alley, and then they were like, and then I was like, okay, well, I'll give them 50 cents for their time, whatever. And I gave him the coin, and he was like, "What, you think I'm an animal?" And I was like, "What?" So, like, he was like, "No, more money." And we were just like, "We don't have any more." And we walked away. But, there were a lot more guys, and it was just the two of us, so it was kind of scary. But they let us leave ultimately. So just make sure you don't take directions from anyone unless you are lost. Then make sure you have cash, because you're going to need to pay them. And then, Fez, we liked a little bit better, which is the other big Medina. The city is cleaner in general. It's not so smelly. The streets are wider, and there's no motorbikes allowed in the city. So we really liked that aspect of it. We still had a couple testy situations where people were trying to take advantage of us. Like, for example, in the Fez Medina, we had the same situation where we were trying to find somewhere, and this guy was trying to guide us. This time we were a little smarter. We knew what was going on, and we told him, "Listen, we're not going to pay you. We're not going to give you any money. We know where we're going. Stop following us," basically. And he was like, open your heart. And then at the end, he was like, "Okay, give me my money. And I was like, "No, I'm not giving you anything." And then I was going to give him 50 cents, and I opened my purse, and I'm like shuffling around. He like sticks his hand in my purse he's like, "Give me that bill, that one." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And like, it was so overwhelming, and like, I was so flustered. I just ended up giving it to him. So, just in those situations, just make sure you're firm, make sure you know what's going on, and keep your eyes open. And then also, on our way to Fez, actually, we were almost into the city, and we were stopped at a light, and these kids, pointed our car and ran up. And my husband, closed his window, and they come with cleaning stuff and to clean our windows. And we're like, no, we're not going to pay you. We're shaking our heads at them. Don't do it. They spray a little water on our window and squeegee it. Like, they didn't do anything. And we were just like, "No, we're not going to pay you." And then the kids came around, and they were like knocking on my door, and I was like, ugh. So I gave them a coin, and just like rolled down my window an inch, and then rolled it back up, and the kid was like, that's it. And I just looked away, and then all of a sudden he pounded on the window as hard as he could and tried opening my door, and I was like, oh, thank God our doors are locked. But that was kind of scary. So anyways, just the people in general, you just get the chance that everyone's trying to get a dollar out of you in any way they can, and it's just not a great feeling. So I absolutely have all the rights in the world to try to get money out of tourists if that's what they want. But, we also have the right to talk about it. Another tip that we'd say is bring a lot of cash to avoid high ATM fees. Obviously, that's similar with everywhere you go, but in Morocco, there's a lot of restaurants that only take cash, and a lot of places that do take credit cards charge really high fees. Like some places were charging 10% fees, which was just insane. So just make sure you have a lot of cash. In terms of tipping, it's not really necessary, but, like a 10 or 15% tip if your service is good. They really appreciate it, obviously. In terms of languages, everyone there speaks like 10 languages. It's extremely impressive. So we didn't have any trouble getting around. But granted, my husband speaks Spanish, French, and English, and so it's pretty easy to find somebody for us that he can communicate with. And then, when you are in those Medinas, make sure you buy some data, get an eSIM so that you can get around, because they're mazes. They are absolutely mazes, and you'll never be able to find your way through them without data. Something random, I think, is that just like the Wi-Fi at every single place we stayed, every single place we encountered was extremely slow. So just keep that in mind. Like, if you're going there to work, if you're going there and you want to like stream something, it's kind of hard. And then another tip, if you like drinking alcohol and that's a really important thing for you for a vacation, in Morocco, it's very hard to find alcohol at like normal places. If you go to like very expensive restaurants, usually they'll have alcohol. We didn't go to a single restaurant that served alcohol on our entire trip, not just because you have to seek it out. There are a few bars and stuff that you can find alcohol, but again, it's just not going to be everywhere. So if that's something that you're into, just know that that's the case. Another tip too is just to bring toilet paper with you always in your purse, because you'll go to a lot of bathrooms where you'll either have to pay for toilet paper and it's not free, or they just won't have it. So just make sure you have a little bit with you, I would say. And then if you're gonna go around and take photos, just be aware that a lot of the women, especially in the Medinas, do not like their picture taken. Some men too, and some shops even don't like you taking pictures of their things. So just be careful when you're doing it. Either be discreet or just, make sure you're far enough away from people and things when you're taking those pictures and videos. And another thing that is important to understand is just the dynamic between men and women in Morocco is a little bit different than other places. So, for example, I went to one of the gyms that my husband and I were going to go to together, and when we entered, they told me, sorry, but we don't mix genders. There's 2 hours a day where women can work out, and the other time is only for men. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. But I think what's important to understand is, I think a lot of it is for the women, because women don't want to work out with men because they want to take off their hair dressings and stuff and wear clothes they usually can't wear in public. So that is what it is. And then one of the gyms that I was at that did allow mixed genders, I mean, the men were just disrespectful in the terms of like staring at me, and just know that like the dynamic is different. Generally speaking, we had a really good experience, and Morocco's a beautiful country, and a lot of the issues that we had with it, or just, a lot of these tips have to do more so with the Medina than the rest of the country. So I just don't think the Medinas aren't accurate representation of the entire country, because we found people in these smaller towns that were just the kindest, nicest, most accommodating people ever. So make sure when you visit Morocco that you visit the entire country, not just these tourist hotspots, right? Marrakesh is the tourist capital of Morocco, but we think it was like our least favorite place, right? So make sure you go see the nature, the beauty of the country. Well, anyways, those were our tips for Morocco. So make sure, if you do visit, that you stay vigilant in some of these areas that I mentioned, and enjoy, and don't forget to go to those smaller areas. If you like this, please like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Roman Ramones. Thanks.